We were up early and said goodbye to the dog before heading off to Dulles International Airport. Once we got there, we saw an incredible sunrise and headed into the terminal. We cruised through security and hopped on the People Mover to take us over to our terminal. Then we hit Chef Jeff's, where we could use our priority pass to essentially get a free breakfast. And mimosas, of course. Today we will be cruising to St. Thomas on a Boeing 737-724 on one of two nonstop flights to St. Thomas from IDA every week in May. Shortly after takeoff, we climbed to about 10,000 feet where we stayed for 10 minutes, which seemed weird to us, but it was no problem. Soon we made that turn and started heading southeast towards our destination. We soon found ourselves landing at St. Thomas. This guy in front of us decided he was going to stick his hands down his pants. Pretty disgusting. And then we were off the plane and made a rather substantial walk to the terminal, where we were greeted by the St. Thomas Welcoming Committee. No wait, we walked outside and got into our vehicle, and then we headed off to Sapphire Bay. Our driver took us along the north side of the island so we could see some fantastic views. He dropped us off at the Sapphire Beach Resort and Marina, right at the bar, where we had to wait a couple of hours for our room to be ready. We enjoyed a couple of drinks, had some lunch, and had a fantastic view of the water. Unfortunately, our room was at the top of a hill, so we left with our luggage and started the trek uphill to our room, which was a sweaty endeavor. But we made it, and we checked out our room, which was pretty nice. We were only going to be here one night, had a nice view. I love seeing blue water and palm trees. Then we hung out for a bit and watched some television, cooled off. Then we headed down to the beach to explore. On the way from our room down to the water, we stopped at Sudi's Caribbean Bar and Grill, which is the home of the Bushwhacker, which is a popular drink here in the Virgin Islands. Also had an Island Hoppin' IPA, which is pretty good, and then we headed down to the water to check out some of the boats. Saw a pretty cool jellyfish. Went out on one of the jetties. It's a beautiful day. Looked across to our next destination, St. John, and that was about it for day one. Day two, we got up and made our way back down to the main area of the resort that had a small shop for breakfast. Once we grabbed our breakfast, we took a seat and were joined by a couple of white-cheeked pintails, a little duck. There were plenty of them around the resort. And then we killed some time just hanging out, watching the water, watching the people. Then it was time to say goodbye to the Sapphire Village, and we were picked up by Brenda for a driving tour of the island of St. Thomas. She told us about the types of houses that exist on the island. We went up and had a couple nice views from overlooks of the city and of Morgan's Bay. And then she took us to Hilltop, I think is what it's called, or Mountaintop, where there are world famous daiquiris. So we had the world famous banana daiquiri there and enjoyed the view. Then we headed down to Charlotte-Amalie, the biggest city on the island, and she told us a little bit about the history, and we saw some fancy stores. An old prison. These are called the 99 Steps. However, if you count them, you will find 103, we were told, and they lead up to Blackbeard's hideout, which is closed, damaged during a hurricane, and never reopened. Brenda dropped us off at the ferry terminal because we had a ferry to catch to St. John. In order to kill some time, we stopped at Captain Quinn's. The ferry left on time. This ferry ride lasts approximately 20 minutes. It was a nice ride. Finally, a day and a half after leaving our home, we pulled into Cruz Bay, disembarked, and we're finally at St. John. We picked up our Jeep and made our way to what would be our island home for the next couple of days. This place is pretty awesome. So this is the living area, and the living area moves right into the deck. Got a hot tub, a fantastic view. Here's the master bedroom. The closet and the bathroom with an outdoor shower. The second bedroom had, I believe, a queen bed, its own bathroom, and a spectacular view of its own. An outdoor kitchen with all of the appliances one would expect. Then we walked down to our beach. Not a sandy beach, but there were plenty of creatures living in the water just feet from our vacation home. We headed into Cruz Bay to La Tapa for dinner. And then we sat on the beach and watched the sunset before heading back and catching some Z's, as we had another big day tomorrow. Day 3, we were up relatively early and we hopped in the Jeep, drove along North Shore Road, which passes a number of world-famous beaches. We were heading to Cinnamon Bay Beach. We were practically the only ones there at 9 o'clock in the morning. We just had a lazy beach day until it was time to head off to lunch. We drove to Coral Harbor, and we were supposed to catch the Lime Out Express, which is a boat that takes you to a floating restaurant called Lime Out. This was the only logistical snafu that we had during our time on vacation, where they sent us to a place where they no longer collect people because there's too much seaweed. But before we left, a guy pulled up and said, "Hey, they don't pick up for Lime Out here. You got to drive over to the other pier." So we did that, and we waited there for maybe 15 minutes before that same guy walked up and said, "Hey, you still trying to get to Lime Out?" And we said, "Yeah." He's like, "Hop in my dinghy and I'll take you." So it turns out he was one of the owners of Lime Out, and he drove us out there. I have to say I was a little annoyed and was expecting the experience to not be good enough to overcome, the logistical issues that we had experienced so far. However, it was flippin' awesome, and I loved it. If we ever go back to St. John, this is absolutely something that we will do again. We headed back to our house, Mampoo Hill, to get cleaned up before heading off to the Windmill Bar. We got there pretty early because we wanted to make sure that we got the seats that we wanted in order to watch the sunset over the islands. The sunset did not disappoint. It was absolutely amazing. And this is easily one of my favorite bars that I've ever been to. Day 4, we were up relatively early again, but not so early because we wanted to grab a bite to eat on our way to the beaches. Just like yesterday, we decided to take North Shore Road. This is a beautiful drive with a number of overlooks into various bays with amazing beaches. Today we were off to Maho Bay because we heard that there was the possibility of seeing some sea turtles out there. Although sea turtles can be found anywhere around the island, this is one of those places that has a grassy bottom which attracts a lot of turtles. When we arrived, we were one of very few people on the beach. There were a number of people out snorkeling, and it wasn't long before we heard them, talking to each other saying, "Oh, you've got to come see this. There are turtles here." So I donned the mask and snorkel and headed into the water to see what I could see. Of course, one of the first things I saw was a school of what appeared to be a million tiny fish. I did see a bunch of different types of fish and coral in the rocks. And then I headed into the grass, or at least over the grass. It didn't take long before spotting my first turtle with a huge remora on its back. These remoras are usually more well known for hanging out on sharks, I think. But apparently they don't discriminate, and they don't always stick to their host. I also saw a bunch of needlefish hanging out above these turtles. All in all, I think I saw 5 individual turtles, and I believe they were all green sea turtles. Swimming with the turtles was an absolutely amazing experience, not one that I will soon forget, and it was very difficult to get out of the water. Watching those turtles really built up an appetite, so we headed back to Coral Harbor and went to Skinny Legs, which is a bar restaurant there. After lunch, we headed back to the house to explore the beach once more. Later that afternoon, we headed back into Cruz Bay for some shopping and discount painkillers before heading to Morgan's Mango for dinner. After a nice meal, we felt obligated to hit the beach once again to watch the sunset. Day 5. We woke up early and caught a cab into Cruz Bay. The plan was to take an international booze cruise over to the British Virgin Islands. The first stop was Great Harbor on Jost Van Dyke. And there, our first stop was Foxy's, a well-known bar run by a guy named Foxy. We had a couple of their signature drinks and then headed over to Corsairs for their signature Voodoo Punch. The beach here was amazing. And maybe an hour later, we pushed off and headed towards White Bay, home to the Soggy Dollar Bar, where the Painkiller was created. This is a popular place, which is only accessible by boat. So we made our way into the water and to the white sand beach to walk down to the Soggy Dollar Bar. The Soggy Dollar is possibly the most famous bar in the Caribbean, so needless to say it's packed all the time. So we walked down to Coco's for a bite to eat and to enjoy the scenery without the throngs of people. It's amazing how fast time flies when you're day drinking. But before we knew it, it was time to swim back to the boat and head south to Normand Island, home of the William Thornton, better known as Willie T. As we pulled up, we noticed that Willie T's is a bit unlike any other bar we've ever been to. First of all, it's located in an old ship, and there were people jumping off of it. So, of course, we got on and took a jump off the old platform, which seems to be a must-do thing there. And then we headed down to the bar with our newfound friends and did the old shot ski, which was a new experience for all of us. Our time at Willie T's was over quickly, and we headed back to Cruz Bay. This time we would be motoring along the south of St. John. I think the ride was under an hour. Our 8-hour cruise flew by, and next thing we knew, it was over and we were going through customs there in Cruz Bay. So while we were there, we walked over and got a bite to eat before catching a taxi to take us back to our beach home. These taxis are remarkable. Day 6, we were up and out of the house at our normal time. We headed down to Mongoose Junction for breakfast at our normal breakfast spot, and we saw our first 2 donkeys on the island. They are somewhat of a mascot, but these were the only 2 that we saw while we were there. Then it was back in the Jeep, heading towards Trunk Bay. Another day and another beach where we were pretty much the only people there. We walked down to dip our toes in the water and almost immediately ran across this southern stingray. Then I donned the snorkel and mask and went looking for some cool stuff. Saw all the usual suspects, then I took the underwater trail, which at one point went around the island that you can see from the beach here, but it no longer does that. It just goes out in a small circle close to shore. Soon our time at Trunk Bay was over and we had to walk out and pick which Jeep we wanted to get into. Then we drove down the road and did a very short hike to a place called Peace Hill. And this gave us fantastic views of both Trunk Bay and Hawk's Nest Bay. Back in Cruz Bay, we decided on Gringos for some Mexican food for lunch. Pretty good. Then we headed to the house to get cleaned up for dinner. Tonight we would eat at Longboards. Pretty good, no complaints. And we headed back down to the beach to take a look around and do some shopping before heading home to watch our last sunset over St. John and St. Thomas. Day 7. We were slow to get up and slow to leave because we were going to be leaving this house, possibly for good. We drove into town for the last time. Stopped at High Tide for breakfast. Then we had a short walk to the ferry, which we got on and said our goodbyes to St. John. This time we would be taking the ferry all the way to Charlotte Amalie. The ride was longer and sadder, but we soon found ourselves getting off the ferry and into a crowded taxi to take us to the airport with all the other sad souls. We hung out at the airport doing some last-minute shopping, getting a bite to eat, and then boarding the plane to take us home. Our flight started out going westward towards the island of Vieques, which is part of Puerto Rico, and then over Puerto Rico proper. Then we headed north over the Atlantic. We crossed over land pretty much directly over Cape Hatteras and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And then we slowly wound our way around, practically flying over West Virginia, waiting for some storms to push out over Dulles before finally touching down. Then pretty much repeated our footsteps. Got off the plane, onto a people mover, picked up our bag, headed to the car, and finally got to see the dog and the family.